The Jedi Temple on Coruscant has always been a bastion of light. For several thousand years, it stood as not only the home of the Jedi, but also as their fortress and as their symbol of supremacy over the Force. However, there were a couple of times when the great walls of this temple were pierced by darkness, and the Sith made their way in. One of the most famous occasions would be the sacking of Coruscant by Darth Malgus during the Great Galactic War of the Old Republic era. The second would likely be Operation Nightfall by Lord Vader at the end of the Clone Wars. However, only once has a Sith managed to infiltrate the Jedi Temple without the use of an army at his back. Only once has an experienced user of the dark side slipped in and out of the temple's defenses completely undetected and unchecked. Appropriately, it would be done by the apprentice of one of the most well-accomplished and notorious Sith in all of the lore, Darth Bane. Bane would send his apprentice Zana into the Jedi Temple in search for knowledge that they needed, risking both his apprentice's life and the entire existence of the Rule of Two. So, what made Bane so desperate to do this? How did Darth Zana manage to get around so many Jedi at once and still get away with it? Well, my friend, in today's holocron, all of the questions are going to be answered, so now let's delve into it. The mission to Coruscant would happen about 10 years or so following the defeat of the Brotherhood of Darkness and the conclusion of the Ruusan campaign. Darth Bane and Zana were the only Sith alive in the galaxy, and the Rule of Two was well on its course by now. It was at this time that Darth Bane was wearing the Orbalisk armor, but soon he began to have second thoughts about it, believing that the armor was damaging him too much. For those of you who do not know, Darth Bane had obtained some armor comprised of parasitic organisms known as Orbalisks, with the creatures latching themselves to him. The parasites had grown all over him to encase his body full of armor, and their shells were so tough that they could repel anything, even a lightsaber. Not only this, but the parasites fed off of the darkness within him, and in turn pumped him with a chemical that increased his strength and power both physically as well as within the dark side. This had happened to him by accident as they attached themselves to his body while he was exploring the tomb of the Sith freed in Nad, in an effort to gain the Ancient's holocron. For a while, Bane didn't have a problem with the Orbalisks, and even enjoyed the power and protection that they granted him. However, he would soon grow to regret this decision after he realized that one of the things that the Orbalisk did was give him a sort of rage boost that threw him into a mindless berserker mode. On 2 occasions of him losing control and flying into a rage, he destroyed their camp and nearly killed his apprentice Zana. This would have flushed a great deal of time right out the drain, not to mention an entire apprentice. Zana herself had not only grown wary of her own life with her master's rage, but she was also getting concerned that as long as he had the armor, she would never be able to take his life and assume the role of master of the Rule of Two. So, in an effort to preserve her own life, as well as the Baneite lineage, Zana subtly manipulated Bane by planting seeds of doubt in his mind during passive conversation. Bane was fiercely intelligent, but because of that, it was actually easier for him to be manipulated, mostly because Zana wasn't wrong, and he realized that, and he knew that the Orbalisks had become far more of a burden than they ever were a benefit. The only issue was that in every source he had on all of the holocrons that Bane had found, there seemed to be no way to remove the Orbalisks without killing the host. Unsatisfied, he used his wide network of contacts to try and find more about them, but had no luck. Finally, the Dark Lord decided that the only course of action would be to find information in the only place that holds the largest storage of knowledge in all of the galaxy, the Jedi Archives. There was only one way to get into the Jedi Temple, and that was going to be with someone powerful, cunning, and who knew exactly what they were doing. The only choice was Zana. Bane had been sending his apprentice on many missions at this time around the galaxy, mostly because she was the only one who could really go out into public and do their business as a Sith. Darth Bane stuck out far too much. He was an absolutely massive man, extremely tall, and had a natural menacing look that Zana simply did not have. Not to mention the Orbalisks made him incredibly bulky and would shred his clothes. To put things simply, Darth Bane stood out in a crowd. Still though, even for Zana, infiltrating the Jedi Temple was a large leap, so she made sure she was perfectly prepared for it. The first thing she did was disguise herself as one of a Jedi. Luckily, the Sith had picked the perfect identity, Padawan Nalia Adalu, apprentice of Jedi Master Ano Wen Chi. both of whom were zoologists who live in the fringes of the Outer Rim planet, the planet known as Polis. Here, they studied the esoteric biological life. They were Jedi researchers and went largely unnoticed. Zana had a similar body to Nalia, with the only change needed was that she needed to dye her hair black. She relied on the fact that people at the temple had not seen Nalia for several years. And to complete the disguise, Zana spent an entire week studying Nalia's profile and committing it all to memory. She completed the full ensemble with a great cover story about her master having sent her to gather some research on a new parasite species that had been discovered on the world. Although her disguise was near perfect, there was still a glaring issue: Zana's own dark side presence in the Force. How was she going to enter the very Jedi Temple, shrouded in darkness? Luckily again for Zana though, she was extremely talented in high-concept Sith knowledge. Obviously she could not simply conceal her presence in the Force, as that would draw too much attention. The Jedi could feel one another through the Force as family. She needed to have a presence of something, but something that was not sinister and dark. This is where she found the ability of false light. It was a difficult spell that required an intense amount of focus, but luckily, Zana got to the point where she could focus on it in the back of her mind and mastered the ability. As long as she did not lapse her concentration, the Jedi would not be able to sense the dark side. Now, with everything set, Zana snuck into the Republic transport and made her way to the temple. The mission was largely successful, as she even met several Jedi and played her part exceptionally well. Though there were some hiccups, as Zana decided to avoid some of the more experienced Jedi Masters, and the more perceptive of them would be able to sense her deceptions. However, even after standing in arm's reach of a Jedi Master, she was still able to fool him, something that gave the young Sith massive confidence. She then searched through the archives, and it took several days to find what she was looking for, which I think is absolutely crazy that Zana was able to keep her spell up for that long both day and night. It wasn't just that Zana snuck in and out, she was there for days undetected. Finally, the Sith found what she was looking for, a small article in the Obelisks, which gave the Sith their lead. With her excitement though, her concentration broke momentarily. But luckily, even after running into an old childhood friend who recognized her and recognized her as Zana, she was able to refortify her spell, escaping the temple and leaving Coruscant immediately. Zana was an extremely underrated Sith for the things that she accomplished, weaving spells around the Jedi like utter fools, walking the halls of the Jedi Temple as a rule of two Sith Lord for days undetected. But with all of this, we also have another small theory. A theory that Zana led to the culmination and the end of the Rule of Two and the destruction of the Jedi, by not what Zana took from the temple, but what she left behind. We once spoke of the fact that Darth Sidious revealed that the holocron of Sorzis Sin, which the Jedi thought was actually a fake, was in fact a spying device, according to Sidious. The Sith had had possession of the Sin holocron all along, and the one that's in the temple had been spying on them since the days of Darth Bane. Sidious said that it was concealed from their sight using a cloaking spell, so let's think of this for a moment. How would the fake holocron get into the Jedi Temple? And who do we know that is skilled enough in cloaking spells to perform such a feat? Indeed, though it is not stated explicitly in the Rule of Two novel, it is our theory that it was Darth Zana who placed the fake Sin holocron inside of the temple. In the video we did before, we talked about how we believed that perhaps the Jedi had found the fake holocron somewhere else and brought it back to the temple, but it's far more likely that Zana may have just placed the spying device during her infiltration, since Sidious gave us an exact timestamp for when the fake holocron was placed, during the Darth Bane era. But anyway, my friends, this is how an extremely powerful Sith was able to sneak in and out of the Jedi Temple right under their noses. If you weren't familiar with the story prior to hearing this, let us know your thoughts about it below. And if you are familiar with this story, be sure to also tell us what you thought when you first read it. Until next time, my friends, may the Force be with you and have a great day.